Wrapping paper flew across the living room like confetti as my sister Tessa tore into the gift I'd spent 3 months making. Her perfectly manicured nails ripped through the simple brown packaging, and I watched her expression shift from curiosity to disgust in less than 2 seconds. She held up the hand-knitted scarf, let it dangle between 2 fingers like something contaminated, and laughed that sharp, cutting laugh that always made my stomach twist. "Seriously, Kellen? A scarf?" Her voice carried across the room, silencing everyone mid-conversation. My father lowered his champagne glass. My aunt stopped arranging cookies on a plate. Even Tessa's boyfriend, Quentin, paused his endless scrolling to look up. "You really are cheap," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter, the kind that people use to fill awkward spaces. My mother's smile faltered, but she said nothing. She never did when it came to Tessa. I sat there on the worn armchair I'd claimed since childhood, feeling heat creep up my neck. But I didn't respond. I just reached under the tree and pulled out one more package, small and wrapped in plain paper, and set it beside her designer handbag. "Don't open that one yet," I said quietly. "My name is Kellen, and that Christmas morning changed everything." The thing about being called cheap is that it stings differently depending on who says it. When a stranger makes assumptions about your worn jacket or secondhand truck, you can brush it off. But when your own sister says it in front of your entire family, when she holds up something you made with your own hands and treats it like garbage, something inside you shifts. I drove home that afternoon with the heater barely working in my old pickup, still wearing the coat I'd had since college because I'd never seen the point in replacing something that still functioned. The radio played carols I'd heard 1,000 times, but they felt hollow now. My apartment was small, just 3 rooms above a bakery on Maple Street, and it smelled permanently of fresh bread and sawdust. Tools covered every available surface. Wood shavings formed small drifts in the corners that I swept up every few days. This was my world, simple and cluttered and mine. I hung my coat on the bent nail by the door and stood in the middle of the main room, looking at the half-finished projects scattered across my workbench. A jewelry box with intricate inlay work. A broken chair leg I was recarving to match the original. A small wooden bird I'd been shaping for Mrs. Holloway down the street, who'd mentioned once that her late husband used to collect them. Growing up, Tessa and I were never really close, but we weren't enemies either. She was 3 years older and lived in a different orbit. While I spent afternoons in Mom's antique shop learning how to identify real mahogany from veneer, Tessa was at ballet or piano or whatever extracurricular activity Dad had signed her up for that season. She got the private school education. I went to the local public school and worked weekends helping Mom restore furniture. She got the new car for her 16th birthday. I inherited Mom's station wagon when she passed. The divide wasn't something anyone talked about directly. It just existed, like the weather. Dad ran a successful luxury furniture company, Ashford & Sons, even though I was the only son. He'd built it from nothing, and it showed in everything he touched: expensive watches, tailored suits, a house with more bathrooms than people. Mom had been different. She'd owned a small restoration shop called Remembrance Restorations, a cramped space filled with broken heirlooms and patient hands. After she died 4 years ago, Tessa convinced Dad to sell it. "It's just taking up space," she'd argued. "Mom wouldn't want you clinging to the past." I'd tried to buy it myself, but I was 24 and broke. The shop sold to a developer who turned it into a smoothie bar. Every Christmas since Mom died, I'd given handmade gifts. The first year, I'd carved wooden coasters with each family member's initials. Tessa had left hers on the coffee table at the gathering, forgotten. The second year, I'd restored an old picture frame and placed a photo of Mom inside. Dad had thanked me politely and set it in his office, where I'm pretty sure it still sat untouched. The third year, I'd knitted blankets. Tessa had laughed then too, though not as cruelly. "Did you join a knitting circle, little brother?" Meanwhile, she arrived each year with shopping bags full of expensive perfumes, designer scarves bought online, gift cards to restaurants none of us could normally afford. Everyone oohed and awed over her generosity. My gifts got polite nods and quick thank yous before being set aside. This year, I'd spent September through November teaching myself proper knitting techniques from online videos. The scarf I'd made for Tessa was soft gray wool, her favorite color, with a pattern that had taken me 16 hours to complete. I'd thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe she'd see the effort, the care, the thought behind it. Instead, she'd held it up like evidence of my inadequacy and made sure everyone saw. The small brown package sat on my workbench now, unopened. I'd told Tessa not to open it yet, and she'd rolled her eyes but agreed. Probably thought it was another handmade embarrassment she could mock later. Inside was something I'd been working on for 6 months. A wooden music box, no bigger than my palm, carved from a piece of cherry wood I'd found at an estate sale. The mechanism inside played the first few notes of the lullaby Mom used to sing to us. The lid bore an intricate relief carving of 2 trees, their branches intertwined. I'd burned Tessa's initials on the bottom alongside Mom's. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't simple. It was the most complex piece I'd ever attempted, and I'd poured everything I knew into making it perfect. But she wouldn't open it today. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe never. And that was fine. Because something had shifted in me that morning when she'd laughed. I'd spent years trying to prove to my family that what I did mattered, that making things by hand had value, that Mom's way of seeing the world wasn't outdated or impractical. I'd failed. They still saw me as the disappointment, the one who didn't join the family business, who lived above a bakery and smelled like sawdust. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I opened the shop at 8, the same as always. I'd named it Ardent Restorations when I'd finally saved enough to rent the tiny storefront on Oak Avenue, 2 streets over from where Mom's shop used to be. It wasn't much. 1 room with a workbench, some shelving, and a small display window that faced the street. Most of my clients were locals who needed furniture fixed or wanted old family pieces restored. Mrs. Chen brought in a rocking chair with a split seat. Mr. Delgado needed his grandmother's dresser refinished. People paid what they could, and I never turned anyone away for lack of money. Mom had taught me that some things were worth doing regardless of profit. The work was meditative. Sanding down old varnish, feeling the grain of the wood reveal itself beneath my hands, matching stains to original colors, fitting joints back together with patience and glue. Hours disappeared. The world outside faded. It was just me and whatever broken thing I was trying to make whole again. Around noon, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up from the table leg I was stabilizing to see an elderly woman I didn't recognize. She wore a long wool coat and carried a leather bag that looked older than me. "Are you Kellen?" she asked. Her voice was soft but steady. I nodded, setting down my tools. "That's me. How can I help you?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden jewelry box, clearly handmade but damaged. The hinges were broken, the finish cracked, and the inlay pattern on the lid had several missing pieces. "I was told you're the person to see about this," she said, setting it gently on my workbench. It belonged to my mother. I picked it up carefully, turning it in the light. The craftsmanship was remarkable, probably early 1900s, with marquetry work that would take weeks to replicate properly. "This is beautiful," I said honestly. "The damage isn't as bad as it looks. I can fix the hinges and restore the inlay, though I'll need to source matching wood for the missing pieces." She smiled. "I'm not worried about the time. My name is Alara Finch. I run a foundation that supports traditional artisans." I'd heard the name before but couldn't place it. "I've been watching your work for a while," she continued. "You don't just fix things. You restore memories. There's a difference." Something about the way she said it made my throat tight. Alara visited twice more that week, each time bringing another small repair project and staying to watch me work. She asked questions about my process, my training, where I'd learned. I told her about Mom, about the hours spent in her shop learning to see what other people missed in damaged furniture. She sounds like she understood something important, Alara said during her third visit. That objects carry stories, and preserving them matters. Nobody else seems to think so, I said, more bitterly than I'd intended. My family thinks I'm wasting my time. Alara was quiet for a moment, running her fingers along a table I'd just refinished. I run an artisan showcase every spring, she said finally. We feature craftspeople who work in traditional mediums. Would you be interested in participating? I hesitated. Public exposure wasn't my strength. I preferred the quiet of my shop, the solitude of my work. It's just a booth, she added gently. You display some pieces, talk to people who appreciate what you do. No pressure. I agreed, mostly because saying no to Alara felt impossible. She had a way of making you believe in things you'd given up on. That Sunday, we had family dinner at Dad's house. It was a monthly tradition that I usually dreaded but attended out of obligation. Tessa was there with Quentin, both of them dressed like they'd just come from a photo shoot. She worked for Dad now, running the marketing side of Ashford & Sons, and business was apparently booming. Over roasted chicken and potatoes, I mentioned the artisan showcase. I got invited to display my work at this spring event, I said during a lull in conversation. Tessa looked up from her phone. What kind of event? It's for traditional craftspeople. Woodworking, restoration, that sort of thing. She smirked. So you'll have a booth next to someone selling scented candles and macrame plant holders? Quentin snorted into his wine glass. Even Dad looked skeptical. That's nice, son, he said carefully. But is it going to lead anywhere? You can't make a real living at craft fairs. It's not a craft fair, I started, but Tessa cut me off. Look, I'm just saying, maybe it's time to be practical. You're almost 30. How long are you going to play with wood scraps? The table went quiet. I set down my fork, suddenly not hungry. The weeks leading up to the showcase passed in a blur of preparation. I selected my best pieces, a restored Victorian writing desk, a set of hand-carved bookends, several smaller items that showed different techniques. Alara checked in regularly, offering encouragement and advice. They laughed at you, didn't they? She asked one afternoon. She'd seen through me easily. I nodded. My sister thinks I'm wasting my life. Alara smiled, not unkindly. Good. That means you're ahead of them. People mock what they don't understand, and they fear what they can't control. I worked longer hours, my hands developing new calluses, my back aching from hunching over the workbench. But there was something almost desperate in my effort now. Not to prove Tessa wrong exactly, but to prove to myself that what I was doing mattered. The showcase was held in a converted warehouse on the east side of town. When I arrived to set up my booth, I felt completely out of place. Some vendors had elaborate displays with professional lighting and printed banners. I had a folding table and a handwritten sign. But something unexpected happened. People lingered at my booth. They touched the wood, asked questions about techniques, wanted to know the stories behind the pieces. A woman wearing a press badge stopped by late in the afternoon. She introduced herself as a freelance journalist covering the event for a local lifestyle blog. Can I ask you a few questions? She said, already pulling out her phone to record. I wasn't comfortable on camera, but I agreed. She asked about my background, about learning from my mother, about why I chose restoration over new construction. I answered honestly, talking about preserving memories and giving broken things second lives. The interview lasted maybe 10 minutes. I forgot about it immediately. 3 days later, Alara called me. Have you been online today? She asked. No, why? Check your email. And maybe sit down first. The video had gone viral. Not massive, but enough to matter. 50,000 views and climbing. The headline read, "The Man Who Gives Broken Things a Second Life." Comments flooded in, people sharing their own stories about family heirlooms and lost memories. Someone had created a hashtag. My phone started buzzing with messages from people wanting to hire me, asking about commissions, requesting information about the shop. I sat on my apartment floor, staring at my phone, not quite believing what I was seeing. Tessa saw the video too. I know because she called me at 2 in the morning. Since when do you do interviews? She demanded. No greeting, no congratulations. I rubbed my eyes, trying to wake up. It just happened. A reporter asked questions. Well, it looks desperate. Like you're trying too hard. She paused. I posted about our new furniture line launch yesterday. Nobody cared. But your little pity story gets thousands of views. I didn't know what to say. It's not a competition, Tessa. She laughed, that same sharp sound from Christmas. Everything's a competition, little brother. You just usually lose. She hung up before I could respond. The next morning, I saw that she'd posted her own content, a sleek video showcasing Ashford & Son's latest luxury collection. The comments weren't kind. Try being as real as your brother, one read. This is everything wrong with modern consumerism, said another. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. The viral video opened doors I hadn't known existed. Alara called again, this time with a more serious proposal. I'm part of a foundation that funds artisans who blend traditional techniques with sustainable practices, she explained. We're looking for people to represent the future of craft work. Would you be interested? The next few months were a whirlwind. The foundation, called Heritage Collective, offered funding to expand my shop and hire assistants. They connected me with other craftspeople across the country, created a network of support and collaboration. I moved into a larger space, a former warehouse with high ceilings and natural light. I hired 2 people from the community, teaching them the techniques Mom had taught me. We took on bigger projects, more complex restorations. Word spread. Museums started reaching out, asking if we could restore pieces for their collections. Private collectors sent inquiries about furniture too damaged for anyone else to attempt. I kept prices reasonable, but the volume of work meant I was actually making a living, a real one, for the first time in my adult life. I didn't announce any of this. I didn't post about it on social media or send updates to my family. I just kept working, kept building, kept doing what I'd always done but on a larger scale. Meanwhile, Tessa's company was struggling. I heard about it through Dad, who called me one evening sounding worried. She's overextended herself, he said quietly. Expensive inventory that isn't moving, contracts with suppliers she can't afford to pay. I've been covering some of her costs, but... He trailed off, and I could hear the weight of it in his voice. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because she won't listen to me, and she needs help. I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to enjoy watching Tessa's perfect facade crack. But mostly I just felt tired. I'll think about it, I told Dad, and hung up. 2 weeks later, Tessa showed up at my new workshop. I almost didn't recognize her. Her makeup was smudged, her designer coat wrinkled. The confidence that usually armored her was gone. I need help, she said, standing in my doorway. No preamble, no apology. Just that simple admission. I gestured for her to come in. We sat in my office, a small room I'd built in the corner of the warehouse. She told me everything, the investors pulling out, the inventory gathering dust in warehouses, the mounting debt. I don't know what to do, she finished, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm good at appearances, but you're good at actual things. At fixing things. I pulled an envelope from my desk drawer. I'd been carrying it around for days, not sure if I'd use it. There's a gala next month, I said, handing her the envelope. Client appreciation event. You should come. She frowned, clearly expecting something else. Why? Because maybe you need to see what I actually do. What I've built. She took the envelope reluctantly, turning it over in her hands. Is this charity? Are you pitying me? No, I said honestly. This is me offering you a chance to understand something you've never bothered to learn. She left without another word, but she took the invitation. The month passed quickly. The gala was Heritage Collective's idea, a way to showcase the artisans they supported and attract new donors. My work would be featured prominently, along with several other craftspeople from around the region. I was nervous about the attention, about speaking in front of wealthy collectors and foundation representatives, but Alara coached me through it. You're not performing, she reminded me the day before. You're just sharing your truth. The gala was held in a renovated historic building downtown. When I arrived early to help set up, I was struck by how professional everything looked. Display cases held my work alongside others, carefully lit and labeled. Guests began arriving at 7. I stood near the entrance, greeting people, shaking hands, accepting compliments that still felt strange to receive. Around 8, I saw Tessa enter. She stopped just inside the doors, her eyes scanning the room. I watched her face change as she processed what she was seeing. The banners reading, Ardent Restoration's annual gala. The guests treating me not as an afterthought but as the host. The journalists conducting interviews, the collectors discussing my pieces with reverence. She made her way toward me slowly, weaving through the crowd. When she finally reached me, she looked stunned. You're hosting this? She asked. I nodded. The foundation supported my expansion. This is partly a thank you to them, partly a showcase of what we've been building. I have a team now. We're restoring pieces for museums, private collections, historical societies. A journalist approached, asking for a photo. Are you siblings? She asked cheerfully, camera ready. This must be the sister who called him cheap at Christmas, someone else joked lightly. The comment was meant to be funny, but Tessa's face went red. I could see her preparing to deflect, to make an excuse. She taught me what value really means, I said, covering for her. The words came out smoother than I felt. Sometimes you need someone to challenge you to figure out what you're really working toward. The journalist smiled, snapped the photo, and moved on. Tessa stared at me. Why did you do that? Do what? Cover for me. I was horrible to you. I shrugged. You were. But embarrassing you here doesn't fix anything. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the noise of the gala swirling around us. People I'd never met were discussing my work with enthusiasm, praising techniques I'd learned in Mom's cramped shop, valuing what I'd spent years being told was worthless. I didn't know, Tessa said finally. Didn't know what? That you'd built this. That you were doing something real. I looked at her carefully. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. I tried to tell you. All of you. But nobody wanted to listen. She nodded slowly, blinking rapidly. I need to go, she said. But she didn't move immediately, just stood there looking lost. We can talk later, I offered. When you're ready. She left shortly after, slipping out before the speeches began. The gala was successful beyond anyone's expectations. Heritage Collective secured enough donations to fund 3 more artisan expansions. My work received commissions that would keep me busy for the next 2 years. Local news covered the event, and the viral video from the spring showcase was mentioned again, creating a full-circle story that media outlets loved. I drove home that night exhausted but satisfied. The validation felt good, but it wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that I'd built something sustainable, something that honored Mom's legacy and created opportunities for others. My phone buzzed around midnight. A text from Tessa, can we talk? I responded, tomorrow. Coffee shop on Maple. She agreed. We met the next afternoon. She looked better, more composed, though the vulnerability from the gala still showed around her eyes. We ordered coffee and sat by the window overlooking the street. "I'm sorry," she said after a long silence. "For Christmas, for all of it. I've been horrible." I didn't disagree. "Why?" I asked. She stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. "Because you made it look easy. Living small, being content, not needing approval. And I was drowning trying to be impressive. I was never trying to make you look bad." "I know," she said. "That's what made it worse. You were just being yourself, and I couldn't stand that it was enough." We sat there for a while, not saying much, just existing in the same space without hostility for the first time in years. Finally, Tessa asked, "What do I do now?" "About the company?" "You want my advice?" Surprisingly, yes. I thought about it. Strip it down. Stop trying to compete with luxury brands you'll never outpace. Find something you actually care about and build from there. She nodded slowly. "Like you did." "Like Mom did," I corrected. I just followed her blueprint. Another silence, this one more comfortable. "I never opened it," Tessa said suddenly. I looked at her, confused. "The last gift. From Christmas. The one you told me not to open." My heart did something strange in my chest. I'd forgotten about that. "Why not?" "Because I was ashamed," she admitted. "After how I treated the scarf, I couldn't face whatever else you'd made." "Do you still have it?" She pulled it from her bag, still wrapped in the same brown paper, slightly crumpled now. "I've been carrying it around," she said, setting it on the table between us. "Open it now." She looked at me nervously, then carefully unwrapped the package. The music box sat in her palm, the cherry wood glowing in the afternoon light. She turned it slowly, examining the carved trees, running her fingers over the details. When she opened the lid, the lullaby began to play. Mom's lullaby. Tessa's hand started shaking. She closed her eyes, listening to the few notes repeat, and when she opened them again, tears were streaming down her face. "How did you?" She started, but couldn't finish. I reached across and turned the box over, showing her the burned initials on the bottom. Hers and Mom's, intertwined. "I've been working on it for 6 months, I said quietly. "Since last summer. I wanted you to have something that reminded you where you came from." She couldn't speak, just held the music box and cried silently while people moved past us on the street outside. Eventually, she wiped her eyes with a napkin and looked at me. "I don't deserve this." "Probably not," I agreed. "But that's not why I made it." Christmas came around again, a full year after the morning that had started everything. Dad hosted at his house, same as always, but the atmosphere felt different. Tessa arrived early, helping set up instead of making an entrance. She'd closed her company 3 months earlier, restructured her life, and was working on something new, something smaller and more personal. She hadn't shared details yet, but I could see the change in her. The family gathered in the living room as we'd done for decades. The tree sparkled with lights. Cookies covered every surface. Dad poured champagne. When it came time for gifts, I felt the familiar anxiety creep in. I'd made things again this year, carved wooden frames for family photos, each one unique. I handed them out slowly, watching faces for reactions. Tessa opened hers carefully. Inside the frame was a photograph I'd found in Mom's old things, the two of us as kids, standing in the restoration shop, both of us covered in sawdust and smiling. "I found it last month," I said. "Thought you might want it." She stared at the photo for a long time, then set it carefully aside. "My turn," she said, reaching under the tree. She pulled out a package wrapped in simple brown paper, tied with twine. No ribbons, no bows. She handed it to me with shaking hands. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a leather journal, clearly old, the pages yellowed and filled with Mom's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Her restoration journal, I breathed. Where did you find this? I kept it, Tessa admitted. When we sold the shop, I took it. I told myself I'd read it someday, but I never did. It should be yours. I opened the journal carefully. Mom's notes filled every page, techniques she'd learned, wood types and their properties, client stories, sketches of projects. Years of accumulated knowledge, preserved in her neat handwriting. Thank you, I managed. My throat felt too tight to say more. Dad cleared his throat. I have something too, he said, pulling out an envelope. He handed it to me awkwardly, like he wasn't sure of his reception. Inside were legal documents. I scanned them quickly, not understanding at first, then read them again more carefully. You're buying the old shop space? I asked. He nodded. The smoothie place is closing. I talked to the landlord. The building's available, and I thought. He trailed off, looking uncertain. I thought you could reopen it, he finished. Remembrance restorations. The way it was meant to be. I stared at the papers, then at my father, seeing him clearly maybe for the first time. He'd always been distant, preoccupied with business, but this gesture cracked something open. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have supported what you were doing years ago. I was too focused on my way being the only way. The room had gone completely silent. Even Tessa was crying again, though she was trying to hide it. I stood and hugged my father, the papers crumpling between us. Thank you, I whispered. Later, after the official gift exchange ended, Tessa pulled me aside. There's one more thing, she said. She led me to the kitchen, away from the family. I've been working on a business plan, she said. Something smaller than before, more focused. I want to start a company that connects traditional craftspeople with contemporary markets. I listened as she outlined her idea, a platform that would help artisans like me reach customers who valued quality and sustainability, handling the marketing and logistics while letting the craftspeople focus on their work. I don't know if it'll work, she admitted. But I learned something from watching you. Success isn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It's about doing something that matters. You want my help? I asked. She nodded nervously. If you're willing. I know I don't deserve it after everything, but I want to do better. I want to build something that would have made Mom proud. I thought about it for a moment, weighing the risk of working with someone who'd hurt me so deeply against the possibility of redemption. On one condition, I said finally. What? We do it honestly. No shortcuts, no pretense. We build something real. She smiled, a genuine one I hadn't seen in years. Deal. We shook hands in Mom's old kitchen, surrounded by the smells of Christmas dinner and the sound of family laughter from the other room. It felt like a beginning. The next 6 months were challenging. Rebuilding trust took time. There were moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, when Tessa would slip into her old way of thinking and I'd have to call her out. But slowly, carefully, we found a rhythm. A year later, Remembrance Restorations reopened in its original location. Tessa's platform, which she'd named Legacy Makers, launched simultaneously. We threw a joint opening event, inviting everyone who'd been part of the journey, Alara and the Heritage Collective, the journalists who'd covered the story, clients old and new, and family. Dad gave a speech about legacy and second chances that left half the room in tears. Tessa stood at the front counter, greeting customers with a warmth I'd never seen in her corporate persona, explaining how the platform worked, connecting craftspeople with people who valued their work. I worked in the back, teaching 2 new apprentices the techniques Mom had taught me, passing down knowledge that would outlive all of us. Late in the afternoon, after most guests had left, Tessa and I stood in the restored shop, looking at Mom's old workbench, now cleaned and refinished. She'd be proud, Tessa said softly. Of both of us, I agreed. Eventually. We laughed, the sound mixing with the smell of wood and varnish, with the late afternoon light streaming through windows that had seen decades of work and love. The music box sat on the counter, its lid open, playing Mom's lullaby on repeat. Outside, people passed by the window, some stopping to look at the sign, Remembrance Restorations. Giving broken things a second life. Not everything can be fixed, but some things can be rebuilt, stronger and truer than before. That Christmas, when Tessa called me cheap, she went silent when I handed her the last gift. But the real gift wasn't the music box. It was the journey that followed, the breaking down and building up, the learning that value can't be measured in price tags or appearances. It's measured in time, effort, and the willingness to see worth in things others overlook. We chase luxury and forget legacy. My sister taught me the difference, and I taught her that real gifts can't be bought. They're built, with patience and care, one careful piece at a time.